Morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Real estate case studies. I've tried to put these kind of programs together over the years, and for some reason, most of us in the business just don't want to share our trade secrets. And so I haven't been successful in putting that together, but I have now found that as we mature, I don't use that old word, people are a little more willing to open up. And so we have a great lineup. Tanner, not putting you in the old category, if your boss has told you to be here and he's old, but you're the young guy here in the lineup. So we are going to start off talking about dirt, because everything starts with the land. And our land case study is going to be presented by Terry Klipp, who is a principal in Terramar Properties, which is a commercial brokerage development and investment company that was founded in '72. During the past 40 years, see what I mean about experience? He has been involved as a real estate broker in the sale of over 300 properties, and he has been either the manager or principal in over 200 residential subdivisions in southern Arizona. He has a Bachelor of Science degree from San Diego State University and an MBA from Thunderbird. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Terry.
Jim, thanks for that introduction. And before I get started, just by show of hands, how many of you have actually taken a piece of raw land, gone through the entitlement process, improved the lots, and sold those lots to somebody else? I asked that question for a couple of reasons. One is to see who else Jim called before he called me to do this, and to see
You're
who.
the last one, Terry.
Thank you, Jim. And to see who's going to fall asleep here in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Actually, I'm going to kind of do a Cliff Note version of residential subdivision development. I'm going to make the assumption that this is in Pima County, and there are several jurisdictions, a couple of them represented here today. The process is pretty similar in most of them. They may call it little different things, but if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But I'm going to just assume Pima County. I'm also going to assume that the property is already zoned for what you want to develop, because rezoning is a totally different process, as those of you in the room who have been involved know. Actually, and I'll start with sort of a historic perspective. I've done this for a while, as Jim said. When I started, I had blonde hair and a lot of it. The process, it sounds easy, but it's not that easy. I'm going to talk about it first from kind of a historic perspective, then talk about the actual entitlement process, which is really the platting and the improvement plans on a piece of property. Actual site construction budget, which you do after you get your plans done, then the actual development process, getting it from a raw piece of dirt to finished, and lastly we'll talk a little bit about the investment side, what we call land banking. Historically, the first project I developed was in 1973. It was called Villa del Cerro. It was out in the Tucson Mountains, 31 developed lots, 1 acre lots. The subdivision improvements included county maintained dirt streets, Tucson water, which was a great thing, underground electric and gas by a company called TG&E, Tucson Gas and Electric, which doesn't exist anymore as we know, and telephone by Mountain Bell. There were no cable TV companies at that time, so that didn't enter into the equation. The improvement costs on that project were about $2,500 a lot, including engineering. The engineering contractor, any engineers in the room? No engineers, okay. Civil engineering, our total contract for the civil engineering was $12,000, and that included the survey, the construction staking. So, sounds great, $2,500, but it really, at that time, that was kind of what it was. And those same lots sold between $7,000 and $10,000 for a fully improved 1 acre lot. And things obviously have moved forward in the last 40 years, and things change. But a lot of the things that we do today in terms of subdivision entitlement can go back to the 70s and 80s. A lot of the hoops we have to jump through. Again, this is just a picture of this project was out at the corner of Camino del Cerro and Tortolita Road. The streets were dirt, but then the county came in and for dust control, I'm sure must have paved them. And go out there today and it's a very, very nice, pleasant place to be. As far as the development process and the entitlement portion, getting things ready to build, it's a process. The first thing you want to do when you're going to get your entitlements done is you want to hire a good engineer. There are several of them in this town. Back 40 years ago, there were only one or two. Today there are probably a half dozen to a dozen very capable engineers. We try to kind of fit the engineer to the project. If it's a small little project, we might hire a small little engineer. A large project, you probably wouldn't do that. The first thing that you do with your raw land is you have to do your preliminary or tentative plat. That tentative plat is really the Bible. That shows you everything that you really want to know about your project once it's completed. And you really can get your cost estimate done pretty well once you have that tentative plat completed. It shows you your grading limits, it shows you your topography, your finished lot elevations, it shows you where the water is, where the sewer is. So you can really, using past projects, put a template together and estimate the costs of those lots. Next thing you do once you have your tentative plat done, typically, and I'm talking now about a production subdivision where you're going to be, those lots are going to be used by a home builder like Pepper Viner to build a production house. The next plan that you would do would be your grading plan. This has to go in, be submitted to Pima County for their approvals. It's showing your flood limits, it shows your lot configuration, finished pad elevations, so forth. It's really just an outgrowth of that tentative plat. Lots of things happened. I don't know how many of you remember 1983 floods when Mr. Parrish's office building fell in the river at First Avenue and the Rito.
Still own it today.
Still own it. And a lot of things because of that changed. We have what's called erosion hazard setbacks on plats. When you have a 100-year floodplain limit, you have to sit back a certain distance with a dwelling so you don't fall into the river. Some of these things have sort of unintended consequences. I think when you're building a house in the Catalina foothills next to a 100-year floodplain wash that's been there for eons, an erosion hazard setback is kind of ridiculous, but it is arbitrary. There are ways to go in and get that modified, but when you do your project, if you've got a 100-year floodplain, you're going to sit back a certain distance from that flood limit. Once you get your grading plan, your tentative plat done, then you're going to do your final plat, and once that's completed and gets recorded, along with it are two other documents that get recorded along with your plat. One is what is called an assurance agreement, and the other one is the CC&Rs, or the restrictions that you want to place on those lots. And the assurance agreement is kind of an interesting document because it didn't exist probably 30 years ago, maybe less, maybe even 20. But I don't know how many of you remember the name Ned Warren. Tony remembers, Duff remembers. Ned Warren was a rather infamous developer in Arizona. He actually in 1978 was convicted of 20 counts of land fraud, and he was named the kingpin of land fraud in Arizona, and he went to prison, and he died there in 1980. But what Ned would do would be he'd go plat a subdivision, and he'd make all kinds of promises, but he would sell paper lots. He wouldn't he wouldn't put the improvements in. He promised to do it, but he wouldn't do it. So fast forward now 30 years later, when we do a subdivision, we have to assure the jurisdiction that we're working in, Pima County in this case, that we will put those improvements in before we can sell a lot. Originally, when assurances came out, the real estate department, they were going to be cash. You had to put up enough cash to do those improvements. That hurt little developers like us because we didn't have that kind of cash. So we worked with SABA and the jurisdictions to come up with this assurance agreement, which basically is a document that gets recorded against the property that says you can't sell a lot until that assurance agreement is released by Pima County. It's a simple way to get around putting up a lot of money, but it's something that has to be done. From that final plat, now you do the rest of your improvement plans. You've got a sewer plan, a water plan, your dry utilities, your paving plans. You also have to do two other plans that are kind of new. One of them is a native plant preservation plan, and another one is what's called a SWIP plan, or a stormwater prevention or pollution prevention plan. The native plant plan is combined with your landscape plan because you have to go and you have to salvage trees that the jurisdiction and cacti the jurisdiction says is are required to be salvaged, and so you have that plan. And we brought that on as developers ourselves because of the we used to go out and just blade everything, and that's not a popular thing to do in Arizona. So native plant preservation plans came into existence. The SWIP plan is more interesting in that when you drive along even a highway that's being built, you see these little straw tubes that are laying along the edge of the road, or what's called a silt fence that is about so high. The purpose of that is to keep silt from clogging the navigable waterways of the U.S. Now, I haven't seen too many steamers coming up the Santa Cruz recently, but it's a national thing, and we have to abide by it here. In typical subdivision, you might spend $20,000 on those SWIP, what we call BMPs. So it's something that's sort of an unintended consequence. Once we get our improvement plans done, then we put together a budget for how much these lots are going to cost us to develop. This is an actual budget on a 45 lot subdivision that's being planned. You look at that bottom line, almost $3 million. That turns out to improvement costs of $60,000 a lot. Now that's kind of soups and nuts. It's got a contingency factor in there. That's a huge number. Development costs for a typical, it's kind of a bad thing to get into the trap of saying what's a typical lot cost to improve, because if you've been through the process, every project is unique. Things that have added to the costs of development over the years. I'd say the main thing is probably your drainage. You've got to handle drainage now. You have a detention requirement. You can't let more water leave your site once it's improved than came onto it naturally before you improved it. So any water that you're creating due to rooftops and roads, you have to retain or detain, and it costs you in land area, and it obviously just costs you in improvement costs. And once you have everything completed, then you can go build your subdivision. Before you build it, you're probably going to go out and get a bid, 2-3 bids we typically do. There are half a dozen very good site development contractors in Tucson. We then compare that bid against our estimate. We hope it's lower. Not always is, but we hope it is. And then you hire that contractor to actually do the physical work. You have one main contractor, then you hire a lot of smaller guys. First thing you have to do when you start a new project is you have to go salvage those plants. There are companies that do that. They're not your main site contractor. You salvage the plants, you then clear the site, you do your rough grading and drainage, You put in your sewer system, your water system, your dry utilities. You prepare the subgrade on the streets. You put in your curb, your handicap ramps, your base course, your asphalt. Come back, after that's in, you adjust your water valves. You have TEP come out and put in their transformers. Southwest Gas never gets out there to do their thing. Oh, sorry, Matt, no. They, you get everything ready, and then once you've completed everything, then kind of a little bit of the hard work comes. You have to get those assurances released before you can sell those lots to a builder, or the builder has to sell those lots to a home buyer. He has to have that assurance agreement released, because if the title guys that are in the room, they know that if they pull a title report on a subdivision, they're going to see a recorded document, that assurance agreement, that has to be released before you can sell that lot. Talk a little bit about land banking. That's really kind of the topic. Got through the process of building those lots, and really the main question, I think, what is land banking? I kind of describe land banking as an arrangement, almost an arranged marriage between a land banker, that's a developer, maybe an investor, who's going to buy the land, improve the land, and then sell those lots to a home builder over time. And land banking really began in earnest, I think, in the early 1990s. Most of you in this room that have been around long enough remember the RTC. The RTC auction in Tucson was in December of 1990 at La Paloma. A few of you were probably there, as I was. And at that point in time, we thought we were all in bad shape. But I think the government thought we were in worse shape than we were, because really the market was turning already by the time that auction occurred. And a lot of people made a lot of money as a result of buying properties at that auction. And I don't know who it is, and he might be in this room, but I used to see a Mercedes convertible that had a personalized plate that said THX RTC. I mean, it may still be out there, I don't know. But but one of the Jim uses the word in his presentation, the market gap. Well, and that meaning kind of the opportunity, and why land banking is an opportunity, or became an opportunity. And the reason was, after those RTC days, the lenders who were all taken over by the RTC, there was very little financing available to do projects. So we, as others, we provided that financing in improving that lot for that home builder. Really, in a land bank, in my opinion, there are three basic documents that have to exist. Obviously, a purchase agreement to buy the land, a development agreement between the land banker and the builder that basically says who will do what, define what a developed lot is. Example, retaining walls or perimeter fencing, sidewalks. Those are things that are typically done by the builder, not by the land banker. So that development agreement defines all of that. And then the last document, and really the most important document, is what we call a rolling option, or an option agreement. It's that agreement that that builder enters into with the land banker that says, I'm going to buy these lots over this period of time, and if I, for some reason, don't, and I default, you, Mr. Land Banker, get those lots back. And we've been in positions over the years with downturns where we've had that happen. You don't like it, but you hope that if you structure it right at the beginning and you take those lots back, your basis is such that you can sell it to somebody else and not lose. So my opinion is it's very, very important that you structure that transaction so it's sort of a win-win. I mean, if you put so many conditions on that builder, even though he says, yeah, I can do that, and he can't, guess what? You own the lots. Also, if you're going to do a land bank, my opinion is you want to do a project that is fairly generic. You don't want to get into a kind of a single purpose lot. That way, if you get them back, you can go find someone else to buy them. But if you've got a lot that's product specific, you know, you basically have to find someone else who wants to build that same product. So, returns on land banks, it's kind of like an income property investment. The difference being that each time the builder takes a lot down, you get part of your asset value back, plus you're getting your return. In a traditional income property, you're getting your return based on the rents that come in every month or quarterly or whatever, and that asset you still own, and you might own it for 20 years, and you don't get the benefit of the appreciation of that asset until you sell it. Land banks typically are 2 to 3 years total, and then you start again. Income properties obviously last much, much longer. Specifically, talk about a specific project that we're doing right now. It's a project, a land bank. It's in Green Valley. If you know Green Valley, it's the Las Campanas area. It's actually Las Campanas was a specific plan. This is Block C of Las Campanas. The name of the subdivision is Solterra. The nice thing about it, and this is almost an ideal land bank in my opinion, the project is a marriage between our entity and Fairfield Homes and Dorn Homes, who are building the houses. The thing that makes this ideal, in my opinion, is it's a tentative plat of 283 lots. You're not going to build 283 lots in this market. You might have in 2003, but not in 2013. So we have the plat already approved, the tentative plat, so we can take manageable bites. And manageable bites are really based on what the builder can absorb in a fairly short period of time. Here we have done as small as about 25 lots at a time. If the market turns and we need to do 50, we can do 50. So it's a very manageable process in that regard. The other thing that's great about it is that the builder owned the land free and clear. He can get his construction financing very easily. Development financing today is still very hard to get. The bankers in the room know that. So since he owned the land free and clear, he deeds the land to us for $10. We then put in the money to put all the improvement costs in with no debt. That way, our basis in the lot is really the development cost, should he default. And he likes the situation because he doesn't have to pay those costs. He can use his working capital to build houses, to do the things that he knows how to do. Again, what we like about this project is 283 lots. You know, that's probably it could be we hope not, but it could be a 10-year program. But again, going back to this option agreement, you know, there are requirements that the builder has to take down a lot in so many lots a month. In this particular case, it's just one lot a month. And he was given time to get his models built before there was any type of a requirement to take lots down. So that's basically the land banking side of it. I'll close with just a couple pictures of the project. And one last slide. On the development side, if you can read this, you can cut corners in a lot of ways, but some of them you just don't want to do.
Terry, real quick, we're going to do Q&A after everybody's done, but right today's demand in land banking deals, what's the range of returns that investors, you know, will do a minimum and up, obviously? Andy.
We try to achieve between 15 and 20% on that.
And has that changed over the years? Was it higher or lower before, and what do you think is going to happen in the future?
It was probably a little lower, especially when the public builders were involved. Again, as you know, return is based on risk. You know, if I've got Pulte, or they hear Pulte Homes as my home buyer and the commitment they make, I might take a lesser return than if I had Steve Quinlan over now.
The secrets come out.